My name is Laura Stisler. I'm the Adult Services Librarian here at the Galena Public Library, and I also run our annual literary festival, Galena LitFest. We have a variety of hybrid and in-person and virtual programs throughout the month of January, and this is our first totally virtual program of this year. So all of you, welcome. I just want to real quick thank our friends of the Galena Public Library for providing the funding for this series of programming, as well as all of you for being here. None of this works without an audience, so appreciate each and every one of you. And of course, to Marianne for being here with us tonight. Just a couple of things. Be aware that we are recording this session. It will be posted to our YouTube channel, Galena Public Library's YouTube channel, after the event. Give me a few days and I'll send an email out to everyone and it'll be up there. And also, I've muted you all. You'll find you are unable to unmute yourself. If you have any questions or comments at all throughout the presentation, please put those in the chat window and we'll keep an eye on them. And I'm really happy and thrilled to introduce Mary Ann No, who has been writing since she could pick up a pencil. After teaching middle school and high school for 30 years, she retired and reinvented herself as an author. She publishes novels, short stories, and nonfiction, as well as poetry, found in numerous print and online publications. She writes and lives in happy communion with family, friends, and nature in Wisconsin. You can visit her website, maryannno.com, which I'll pop into the chat shortly, for more information to purchase her books and as well as to read her blog. And without further ado, I will let Marianne take over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to Galena for inviting me. It's the middle of winter in January, and so I am at home. It is single digits up here in southeastern Wisconsin. So thanks so much to Galena and to the people that have funded this so that I could do this virtually without having to get out on the road, which who knows, it could have been 4 feet of snow. At any rate, here I am, and I taught high school English and psychology and middle school before that. So I taught for about 30 years and then decided it was time to do something different. So I retired. I had been writing seriously for probably, since the late 1990s, and was lucky enough to start publishing not too long ago, actually. I published short stories and poetry, but now I've gotten into novels, which is just great fun. And the latest one that I just put out in October, published by Black Rose Writing. I have to put a plug in for my traditional publisher because they're wonderful. Came out in October, and it's called Deserving of Murder. So here's my latest one. This is one of a series about Lynn and Alfred, Lynn Fontanne and Alfred Lunt. They were huge stage fans, actors, I should say. And I am a docent at their summer estate. So when I got into that house, I got to thinking, boy, this would be a perfect place for a murder because you can go anywhere in the house and people have no idea where you are. So there are stairways and there are secret rooms and there are back doors and another back door and a front door and a side door, and you can get anywhere. So I thought, well, I can do this. I've never written a murder mystery before, but this was great fun to write. So, but before we get into how do you write a mystery, because as my title goes, writing a mystery can be a mystery. I just finished a book by Anthony Horowitz called Close to Death, and I think he summarizes some of that so perfectly. He's a narrator. Anthony Horowitz is putting his own name into this novel, and he's writing this novel about an old case of Hawthorne, who's a retired detective. And the narrator says, Hawthorne didn't like what I wrote. 32 pages, and he didn't like it. And Hawthorne answers, you've made half of it up. And the author says, come on, Hawthorne, I can't just write the information you gave me. First of all, the whole book would be only 30 pages long, and it would be boring. Nobody would read it. I've taken what you've given me, and I've added a bit of color. That's all. Hawthorne says, I get that, but you don't think people are going to get a bit fed up with it? I mean, there's even a paragraph about bloody parakeets. You've written all these pages and nobody's been killed. And the writer answers, the narrator answers, I have to set the scene. And anyway, you know perfectly well that there's more to a novel, even a crime novel, than violent death. It's all about character and atmosphere and language. Why do you think people read Jane Austen? She wrote thousands of pages and she never felt the need to murder anybody. And Horowitz says, actually, that's not true. And you know what? He's right. He's right because Jane Austen, in a very early short story that she wrote, did kill off somebody. So anyway, so Hawthorne, the detective, says, anyway, there are clues that you left out that are important. And the writer says, well, how could I possibly know that? So far, we've got a murder mystery because the detective is feeding him this story a bit at a time, a piece at a time. So the author says, we've got a murder mystery with no murder and no one to solve the mystery. If my editor had his way, the dead man would have died in the first paragraph. Well, there's one way to start, all right. Put your murder at the beginning. Well, is that what I did? Not really. I started out with the first chapter, 2 sentences. Nobody was outside and the snow was falling, piling up in the corners, collecting in deep drifts. The white scarf didn't even show against the snowbanks. Well, and then it goes on for another page. And at the very end of that very short chapter, it talks about the snow and the weather and all that. The last paragraph in that first chapter says, the scarf didn't show against the white except for the blood. If not for the darkness, the spray of blood surely would have. And that was my teaser to get people in. The murder itself doesn't happen until halfway through the book. So I guess I was guilty of what the detective was complaining about too. But let's take a look at how you could write a mystery. There are lots of different ways, and I just used one of them. Of course, the first thing people ask you when they read a murder mystery is, who done it? Who done it, right? That's the question in any murder mystery. But an even better one is, how did the author do that? How did he get to that point anyway? So in many cases, it means writing backwards. The author has to know a lot of different things. The author gets to choose who is killed and where. The author gets to choose how that person's killed and the weapon that was used. And most of the time, the author chooses the motive. Who's got motive? Who's got means? Who's got opportunity? Who's got motive? Those are the three biggest. You've probably heard that on TV shows all over the place, right? Means, motive, opportunity. So those are important. But as an author, you need to know a little bit more than that too. Who is killed, first of all, and of course, who is the murderer? But you don't want to give that away until the end. But the writer has to know early on who's the murderer. So who? That's one of the first things. Who? Second of all, where does it happen? That's the setting, right? Where does the murder happen? That's the second thing. Then what? What's the weapon? It could be anything, right? It could be anything. Agatha Christie loved poisons. You could use a fireplace poker. There are all sorts of things that can be used for murder weapons. Then how is it done? How did the murderer actually carry out the act? And then, of course, the motive. Why was it done? Now, those are really well-known journalism questions. Who, where, what, how, and why. So those 5 things are important. However, sometimes the characters throw in a monkey wrench. You have an outline all made, or you have everything, you know where it's going, you think you know where it's going, but there are many roads to solving a murder, right? If there are many roads to solving a murder mystery, then there's going to be plenty of potholes along the way. Many times, most mysteries have multiple suspects, of course, because you don't want your reader to just say, oh, I know who did it on the first page. So let's take a look at some of the murder mysteries that are out there that are really well known. Agatha Christie was just a marvelous writer. and she used all sorts of things. So, spoiler alert here, we're going to look at Murder on the Orient Express. Now, we're lucky enough in that it's been made into a movie several times over the years, and it's so well known. It's a Hercule Poirot mystery. There were lots of those. She used him. In fact, she got kind of tired of him after a while too. But she was really good at closed room murder mysteries. You know, you get everybody in one place and something happens. So, and I did the same thing. I gathered everybody in one place. I'll talk about that in a minute. So Murder on the Orient Express would be one because it happens on the Orient Express, a train. Another one she wrote that would be a closed room murder mystery would be Death on the Nile. And that happens on a cruise ship on the Nile in Egypt. They're on the river, they're floating along, the murder happens. They're trapped, they can't get off, just like the train for the Orient Express. So let's take a look at those 5 questions. So who is killed? Well, it turns out it's a man named Ratchet. I love that name because the name just implies he's a nasty, nasty man. And he is, Ratchet. But another main character that shows up right away is Hercule Poirot. He's the detective. He's going to solve the mystery. You got to have somebody that's going to solve the mystery. It might be you as a reader, but somebody within the story has to solve it. Now, Agatha Christie does not name Hercule Poirot at this point, but she describes his mustache. And I saw the movie that Kenneth Branagh made, and he had this big bushy mustache. And I thought, that's not Hercule Poirot. David Suchet had this little tiny little Belgian mustache, you know. And I went back and reread Murder on the Orient Express, and sure enough, Agatha Christie describes Poirot as having a big, magnificent bushy mustache. Who would remember? Anyway, a reader would recognize that this is Poirot before he's even named. Oftentimes, the detective has a sidekick. So think about Hercule Poirot. If you're familiar with any of his movies or you've read the books, he has many times Captain Hastings. Captain Hastings is not the sharpest tool in the drawer, but he's a good foil. He's a good character to bounce ideas off of and to have talks with and to help kind of work things out. And he also comes up with, many times the sidekicks come up with these ridiculous solutions. They sound okay, but the detective can pick them apart and say, well, that's not quite right here. So Poirot has Hastings, right? Like Sherlock Holmes has Watson. Watson's writing down all the stories, and Holmes is saying, oh, you're just, making everything so glamorous. It wasn't that glamorous, but Watson is right there to tell the story. In Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, there's a doctor and a railroad executive. And those are the 2 people that Hercule Poirot talks to. They go to have dinner together and they talk things out. Poirot comes up with ideas. The doctor and the railroad executive doesn't really come up with any ideas, but the doctor does. All right. So now we've got a setup. It takes a while, of course, for the murder to happen, but you are introduced to the Poirot and his sidekick. That's the who. Where does it happen? It happens on the train, the Orient Express. It leaves Istanbul. Then it goes to Paris, and they all have to get to London, but they're crossing the Alps, right? They're crossing the Alps. So even though it's on a train, what happens is, if you remember, they are hit with a blizzard and the train is stuck. And they have heat and they have food and they have everything that is fine, except they can't get away. They can't get anywhere, but they can make connection and communication with the outside world. So eventually the police are going to show up, right? So the who, the detective and his sidekick, Ratchet, the murdered man, and all the other people that are in this carriage on the Orient Express on its way to London. So that's the where. What's the weapon? Well, once Ratchet is killed, Poirot goes in and there are stab wounds all over Ratchet. So the murder weapon is a knife. Okay. How is it done? And that takes a while to play out. But it turns out that there are 12 stab wounds and there are 12 passengers, and all go in one at a time during the night and stab Ratchet, who's been drugged. And of course, Poirot goes in and looks and picks up details that he has to explain. He can explain them to the doctor, he can explain them to the railroad executive, and through those two, it's explained to us that some of the stab wounds are really deep and some of them are just glancing blows. So apparently it wasn't just one person that stabbed Ratchet. It was everybody in the carriage on the train. And of course, why? Why? Well, part of it is exposed gradually because Poirot introduces us to each single person separately. He calls them into his room and he says, I'm going to interview you. And so you get to meet each one of those 12 characters separately, and you find out that they are all linked together. It turns out that Ratchet killed a baby named Daisy Armstrong. And every one of those 12 people on the train have some connection to the family of that baby, of Daisy. There's a governess, there's a grandmother, there's the father, there's an aunt, and there's her husband. There's the nurse and the nurse's lover. There's a chauffeur, there's a cook, there's the father of the nurse. There's Ratchet's secretary who is turned against him because he's found out what Ratchet did. And then you find out that the doctor that's been talking to Poirot is also connected because he was the family's doctor. All of that gets revealed gradually as the story goes along. It should, if you're familiar with history, it does follow Lindbergh's baby kidnapping. You know, Charles Lindbergh, that was the big famous pilot. His baby was kidnapped, and they went around and around and around for a long, long time, getting ransom notes, getting the police involved, trying to find the baby, trying to find the kidnappers so that they could, capture them or so they could pay the ransom. It turned out ultimately that the Lindbergh baby was murdered. So Agatha Christie took that real live story and turned it into a fiction piece on the Orient Express, stuck in a blizzard, with the whole panoply of characters. So everybody was the murderer. There was no one solution. It was 12 different people. That's pretty complex, okay? But it's the same setup: the who, the where, the what, the how, and the why, finally. The characters are introduced. Those are the facts. There's a storm, there's a murder, there's a bunch of clues, there's a body. Then there's the evidence. And as I said, every character gets their own chapter and they can explain themselves. And then is the examination and the resolution. Poirot, as a detective, sits back and thinks. Those little gray cells, as he calls them, and he talks to the people that are with him. He talks to the doctor, he talks to the railroad executive, and he works it out. And he offers two solutions. He gets everybody back together, as Christie seems to do on many, many stories. Miss Marple, Hercule Poirot, Tommy and Tuppence. You get everybody, all the suspects together in one room, and you start going around. You killed him. You killed him. You killed him. And then you peel back like an onion the layers. Well, you couldn't have done it because thus and such. You couldn't have done it because thus and such. But you could have done it, and so forth and so on. So they come to the conclusion that there are two solutions, really. The truth, where everybody pitched in and killed Ratchet, or they can tell the police when they get there that a person from the outside made it through the snow and came in and killed Ratchet and disappeared. And ultimately, they decided to tell a lie, that everyone would say, yes, it was someone from the outside, because Ratchet was such an evil character He killed Daisy Armstrong. He murdered a baby, innocent child. They don't go into the morality of should we turn him in or not. They just decide to keep quiet. So that's one way of telling a murder mystery. Unravel it bit by bit by bit by bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about a second Agatha Christie, and that is a novella or a short story. It's a long short story called The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It's not a closed room murder mystery. And the main character is Dr. Shepard, and he is Roger Ackroyd's physician. He's the narrator. He tells the story. So the who is killed? Well, the title tells you, the murder of Roger Ackroyd. So Roger Ackroyd is killed. And there's not a detective, but there is a person who is trying to figure it out, who's a doctor, Dr. Shepard. He happens to be the victim's physician, and he's telling the story. Then Agatha Christie brings in Hercule Poirot again. And again, Poirot goes through the facts. This is what happened for the murder. This is the evidence, and realizes there's a discrepancy. Spoiler alert, if you're going to go read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, it's a great way to see how Christie plots this out, because there's a discrepancy in time. Dr. Shepard is telling us the story, and somewhere as he goes along in that story, there are 10 minutes that are unaccounted for. Da 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 da. 10 minutes that the reader doesn't even notice until it turns out that Dr. Shepard is the murderer. And at the end, he breaks the fourth wall and he asks the reader, why didn't you notice that discrepancy in time? I told you everything that happened. Why didn't you notice that? Well, Poirot, of course, notices that and uncovers him. And again, it's kind of one of those odd endings, but it's perfect, because instead of facing the police who have been called in a trial and a sure hanging, because it's clear he murdered Roger Ackroyd, the doctor poisons himself, and ta-da, the murder is solved. Yikes. One of the fun things that happens in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is, as I said, Dr. Shepard, the murderer, and the narrator breaks the fourth wall. In a theater, there are 3 walls, 2 side walls and a back wall, right? And the fourth wall is open to the audience. And so sometimes actors will step out of character, or they will walk to the end of the stage and they will talk directly to the audience and tell them something. And that's what Dr. Shepard does with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. He turns to the readers and he says, why didn't you notice this? I told you the story. It's all right there, right? So it's kind of fun. We were bamboozled by an unreliable narrator. So just like you should do fact checking for anything that you're reading online or whatever, here's Agatha Christie in the 1920s pulling out the same act. Fact checking, which we don't do because we're trusting Dr. Shepard, the narrator. Totally unreliable. He's the murderer. If you want another one, a modern book called Death in the Air by Ram Murali, Ram, R-A-M, Murali, M-U-R-A-L-I, Death in the Air. The main character, who is the narrator talking to us as a reader, telling us a story, right, doesn't have a name. It's a nameless main character. Well, that main character is a man. His female boss is burned alive in an automobile accident. Well, now, okay, who is killed? The boss, the female boss. We don't know the murderer yet, but where is she killed? She's killed in her car. What is the weapon? Well, it's fire, I guess you could say. And how was it done? It was lit by the murderer. And why was it done? Why was it done? Well, it takes a little while to find that out, but as it goes along, the main character, the narrator, tells us the whole story, and he says, I'm going to go down to the police station and get their story. So he sits and talks to the police and finds out what they know. And he says to them, is there a link to any audio? They better have gotten some. They promised. Da 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 da. Did you catch it? Is there a link to any audio? They better have gotten some. They promised. This is the beginning of the final reveal, which takes a while, comes quite a bit later. And you might not have caught it, but if you did, you realize that the narrator is the man who arranged the killing. And he has a junk against his boss, and that's why she's killed. But there too, the narrator is, and he tells you outright, I hope there's audio. They better have gotten some. They promised me there was going to be. Well, who else would they promise? The murderer. Okay, lots of fun. All right. As for me, because I'm not Agatha Christie, I'm Marianne Noe. Deserving of Murder. How did I write it? Well, I had it all planned out, right? It's a closed room murder mystery. 6 guests are invited to work on a play at a remote Wisconsin house on a blizzardy January. So, okay, I got that part started. It's the who, it's the where. All right. Now I had to get them there somehow because this story is based on Lynn Fontanne and Alfred Lunt, these 2 very well-known actors. It's 1947, and I tried to use as many facts as I could. So 1947, I picked 1947 because that's the year I was born. Good year, right? And I thought, all right, I've got to get them from New York. I made the stage hands go on strike, which they did not in 1947. So Lynn and Alfred could not do a play. So they're getting some writers and some actors and a couple of spouses to come out to Wisconsin to their estate in Genesee Depot, Wisconsin, and work on a play. They can't put on a play, but they can work on the next one. So they come out by train, and the train is fantastic. It's like the Orient Express. But they get here and they get into the house and there's a blizzard. Now, it was really funny because I wrote this blizzard and I isolated them in a house in this blizzard. And then I looked up 1947 in Milwaukee because this is outside of Milwaukee, just west of Milwaukee. I thought, gee, I wonder what the weather was like. There was a blizzard. It was a huge blizzard. It was so deep that people had to crawl out their second-story windows to get out of their houses. The snowplows couldn't even start clearing things out for 3 days because there was so much snow. I thought, well, this is going to work great. So here I am. I have the who, right? We got to have who, where, what. Who, where, what, how, and why. The who were Lynn and Alfred, famous stage actors, and it's told through the viewpoint of Lynn. So because it's just Lynn, whatever else goes on in the rest of the house, she can't see. She might be able to hear something, but she doesn't know what's going on. So they're having a great old time. They've got power, they've got food. They do not have telephones because the storm took down the phone lines. And the second night, one of the 6 guests is murdered. Where does this happen? Well, if you read the first chapter, you know it probably happened outside because the bloody scarf is found in the snow. But at least it happened at the main house at 10 Chimneys, the Lunt's summer estate in Wisconsin. So the who and the where are taken care of. Lynn and Alfred are going to be telling the story, primarily Lynn. And Alfred then becomes her foil, and she becomes his when he takes over and talks. What was used as a weapon? We don't know. It wasn't revealed yet, although it was found in the kitchen, if that helps any. We know there's blood, so it probably wasn't poison, but that's all we know as a reader, right? And how was it done? How was it done? Well, because the scarf with the blood on it was found outside in the snow, bloody scarf, it was probably the murder was done outside in this blizzard, away from everyone else. And of course, You know what it's like. You lived in the Midwest, or if you live where there's snow, the winds can howl. You have no idea what's going on anywhere else. Why? Why was it done? That's where I had lots of fun. The 6 guests all have means. It could be anything. You could pick up a fire poker. You could pick up a knife from the kitchen. You could take, a baseball bat that you happen to find. You could take a scarf and strangle somebody. So there are lots of things in the story that could be weapons because it's a plain house. It's an ordinary house, and there are always weapons all over the place. They all have opportunity. Now, because I'm a tour guide at 10 Chimneys, I know what the house is like. In fact, last year, when I coming off of giving a tour with a group, a man turned around and said, "This house would be a great place for a murder." I hauled out my book and I said, "I wrote about one." So anyway, so the house is like a maze. And I had my beta readers read it, and one of the women said, "I could get lost on a staircase. I can't figure out where I am here. Can you put a map in?" So at the very beginning, there is a map of the second floor of the house. The second floor of the house has staircases. It has kind of not secret passages, but you can get from one place to another without knowing where everybody else is. You can get outside. There are several doors. There are several staircases. All sorts of things can go on, and nobody knows where you are. So everybody would have opportunity. And it turns out, as you read along, that every one of those 6 people have motive to kill the person that was murdered. Kind of like Hercule Poirot interviewing each one of the people that killed Daisy Armstrong, or that were connected to Daisy Armstrong somehow in the family. I put in that the backstories were put in between. So as you meet these people, as they appear and come into the house, or they meet Lynn and Alfred in New York, you get the backstory of their biography, a little bit about their history, and why they could be one of the murderers. And all of a sudden, you've piled up these 6 people, and any one of them could have created the murder because they all have motive. The reader finds out those motives. It doesn't happen that the other people in the house find out the motives yet. That takes time to be revealed, but it's really kind of fun. So that was a lot of what I was doing there. Clues are revealed through the backstories. I developed subplots for each one of the characters. There are several different people, right, in the book. Lynn and Alfred, of course, are above suspicion. But there's a couple that is a writer and his wife, and the writer is a really nasty guy. He's not a real sweetheart at all. And his wife is really nice, but his wife has problems, physical problems. She's got scarring on her face and all of that. So that couple is one set. And then there's another set, an actor, at that time, now you would call her an actor, but at that time she would be an actress, and she was in her 60s, and her husband was with her, but he's an accountant. So he's just kind of a hangers-on, and he spends time in the library working on his accounting stuff, they think. So that couple is another couple. And then there are 2 young ingenue girls. And the Lunts were really well known for for taking care of their co-stars, especially the younger ones that were trying to break into the business. So I thought, well, that's good. I can put a couple of these young girls in, ingenues, and I named them actually after Lynn and Alfred's real life mentors. Lily Langtree mentored Alfred, so one of the girls I named Lily. And Ellen Terry in England mentored Lynn. And so the other girl I named Ellen. So we had these 6 people, all very different. And their backstories were, I can't tell you too much because of course it'll give so much away. But the fun thing about it was that it could be any of the people that murdered the one man that was killed. I'll tell you that much. It was a man, because that comes up pretty early. They could have done it. And only one person actually figured it out who was the killer. Of all the people that I've talked to that have read the story, only one person could figure out who was the killer. Most people could get, when they got down to the end, could figure out, they could get it down to two people, but they couldn't figure out which one. So it was great fun. But I always tell everybody, if you buy the book and you read it, everything you need to know is in that book. Everything. Kind of like Roger Ackroyd. Roger Ackroyd tells you, look, readers, I gave you everything you needed. You did not notice that there was a 10-minute discrepancy. And in that 10 minutes is when I went into the study and killed Roger Ackroyd. But you missed it, didn't you? Which was great fun. So I kind of did the same thing. There are some hints in there. And of course, there are red herrings. Now you can go along writing and you can discover, oh dear, the characters are telling me that's not how it went. They don't want to be the one to whatever, and they tell you this isn't going to work. This is it. Things don't come together smoothly enough. You're going to have to change things, which is always kind of interesting to say the least. So that happened with Deserving of Murder also. So I'd like to read you just a little piece here more. And they'll maybe give you an idea of some of the things here. One couple shows up and rides out from New York with them, but they don't all appear at the same time. The next group comes out a second day, and they said, so far, so good. The roads were still relatively visible, and in spite of the blowing snow, they made good time going into town. They were going in, Lynn was going in with the driver to pick up their friends at the station. Once at the station, they pulled up as close as they dared under the deep overhang marking the entrance to the waiting room. I'll run in and wait for them inside, Lynn told Ben. You keep the car running and the heater, please. I think I hear the train coming. She was lucky enough to be on the leeward side of the car so she could get out and slam the door without the wind taking it out of her hands. She ran for the shelter of the station. She was just in time to see her guests disembark, grab coat collars and hoist suitcases, and run across the platform and into the depot. The four travelers looked both tired and a bit disheveled. They shook off snow and began a stream of astonishment at the weather outside. Then Lynn waved at Norma, that getting her attention. There, you see, I told you they promised a driver. Norma set down her suitcase, and look who's here to meet us. She grabbed Lynn and encompassed her in a bear hug. You are a sight for sore eyes. The others were afraid no one would be here to meet us, but I reassured them that you never let me down before. Truth be told, Lynn said, we were a bit worried that the train wouldn't get here at all tonight, but here you are. I'm simply delighted. She turned to the others. But we mustn't stand here gabbing. Ben is outside, keeping the car warm. Norma took Lynn's elbow, a quick introduction. My husband, and thank you for inviting him along. Norma, a 60-plus actress, came eye to eye with her towering husband, both of them wrapped to the ears with coats and scarves. Her full-length sable coat and Cossack hat, pulled as low as she could get it, still didn't hide her red nose, though that was all that was showing. Even her eyes were shadowed under that fur hat. Lynn nodded to each in turn. The two other girls acknowledged her with bobs of their heads, then turned to check that they had everything. In the shuffling, Lynn overheard a whispered exchange between Norma and her husband. Norma's husband mumbled something about damn fine way to greet guests, and New York wasn't. She drew herself up and planted herself in front of him. Of the others, she was the one who knew Alfred, and more intimately Lynn, though Norma had never visited Ten Chimneys. Shush now, she whispered. We're here. Lynn and Alfred take care of their own, and that includes us. She apparently smoothed his ruffled feathers, and in response, he jammed his gloved hands into his pockets and nodded, whispering, I know, dear, I know. But he said aloud, I'm just tired. And so that sets the stage for one of the couples. And you can see that the man is kind of growly, and the woman is very elegant. Again, that's part of the who, setting the stage for who these characters are. And you have to put enough detail in so that readers understand not just what they look like, but what their thought processes are. Now, I want to stop here because I'm looking on the chat band here and seeing, has anyone got a question or a comment? I love to hear questions. Anything for me? I don't see anything. I see there are 15 of you out there. No questions. Wow. Do I wrestle with the words and the vocabulary? Yes. Sometimes I guess you could call it cheating. I go to the thesaurus and see what else is up there. And sometimes the words are perfect that they offer, and sometimes it'll be enough to get me kind of prime the pump, and I can come up with other things. I taught English for 30 years, so and I've been writing now for probably 10. So that's part of the fun of it is looking for the right word. The only thing I don't worry about, which I used to, is in dialogue. If you write dialogue and you say, hello, Lynn said, hello, Alfred chortled, stick to said, because you really don't want people to get caught up in those taglines. One of the things that I really work on is working on what Mark Twain said is, if the old lady is screaming, bring her on and let her scream. Don't say the old lady is screaming. So you have to think of things like what can you do to make it alive? If she's going to scream, then what does her face look like? Is it turning red? Does she squeeze her eyes shut? Does she put her hands, in fists up next to her face? So the more description you can get, and I find trying to describe a face and hand gestures will help me stay away from that just telling the old lady screamed. Okay, can you talk about point of view, please? How and when do you decide on it? Third person, first person. I never use omniscient because it to me it gets too muddy to write. Now some writers can do omniscient. That means that you get to see everything. So in a murder mystery, you would not only get to see, or you'd not only get to hear what's happening in the next room, you would get to see what's happening in the next room. And I don't want to reveal that much. I want the reader to put kind of like I call it the Alfred Hitchcock approach, where your imagination will carry you more than if a writer tells you everything. Occasionally, I'll use first person. A couple of my books are first person. Some of them are multi-generational. And so for a grandmother, for example, I'll use first person. But for the granddaughter, I'll use third person. Third person is kind of tricky because you have to stick in that person's head. So you crawl into, like I had to crawl into Lynn's head and think, okay, what can she see? What can she hear? What does she taste? What does she feel? With tactily, and what does she feel emotionally? I can't think about what Alfred might be seeing because, as you know, everybody looks at something a little bit differently. So for me, it's easiest to stick with point of view in one. It took a long time to get to that, though, I'll tell you. It really did, because I kept wanting to veer off and tell too much of what was going on in the other room, but I wasn't in the other room. Okay. Have I ever begun writing a mystery with one character in mind as the murderer and then changed your mind as the characters and plot evolved? Yes. This one, I knew I wanted somebody murdered. I wasn't quite sure at the beginning. I knew it wanted to be a man, and I didn't know, how I wanted to do that. But as I was going along, I had in mind that this character is going to be the murderer. And that's, as I was saying before, the characters stepped in and said, I didn't know, I didn't do it. That's not my personality type. Go pick on somebody else. So then sometimes the plot changed a little bit. Um, I've changed my mind numerous times on other books, so that didn't really throw me too much because on other books, and this murder mystery is my fifth novel, but it's my first mystery. So that was kind of fun to see. And you ask about how do you handle misdirection without betraying the reader's trust? Yeah, Roger Ackroyd did come dangerously close, and he did break the reader's trust, and that's exactly what Christie wanted to happen. There are other narrators that are unreliable. Holden Caulfield comes to mind. He thinks he's being honest about everything, but he isn't. He isn't always. So it's not a bad thing to betray your reader's trust, especially in a mystery. Because if they trust you or trust the character you're writing, they may not guess the mystery until the end when you want them to figure it out. As a reader, I seldom figure out who done it. I'm with you. What to look for when reading. Sometimes they'll tell you outright, look at time frame. And you know what? I don't really care. I yes, I'm trying to figure it out. What's going to be a red herring? Is this set put in here just to throw me off the track? Is this something honest? Is this a timeline I need to take care of? But I don't want to spend all my time trying to break it down and write down the outline. I want to have fun along the way, and that's what the author is giving you, is a lot of fun. And I love when they get to the end. A book I just finished, the last page, there were several things that were revealed, and I thought, yes, this is really good. And I turned on the last page, and there was one more twist, and it was delightful because I hadn't seen it coming. Okay, do you think while writing or think about the story first and then start writing what you outlined? I've done it both ways. I have one novel out where it was an old woman in her 80s and her middle-aged daughter. And I did outline that one. It took me months to get the outline right because I was trying to have them show parallel traumas throughout both of their lives and how they handled each of those traumas. That book is called A Handful of Pearls. And A Handful of Pearls was very heavily outlined. And so I was writing each chapter in the grandmother's persona, the middle-aged daughter's persona. And so each chapter or each section was kind of a short story by itself. And that was okay. But I've done other stories. I have one called To Know Her that started out with a girl in a coma, a high school girl. And I told my students at the time, because I was still teaching, I want to write about a normal student that has challenges, but makes some good decisions, some terrible decisions, whatever. And then all of a sudden, the parents started to talk to me in my head saying, you got to put our story in there too, because the mother did not want to withdraw life support. The father did. And I said, go away, go away. This is not your story. And they said, if you don't put us in there, it's not going to work. I had to do a complete turnaround and include them. And of course, it made it a much better story. So that's To Know Her. Do you cast all your suspects as if they could each plausibly committed the murder? Yes. Yes. Did I give them only one or two of the three of the means, motive, and opportunity? Well, the means anybody could have done, because as I said, they're in this house and they could have picked up any kind of thing for a weapon. They could have walked all over the place in that house and nobody would know where they were. So opportunity was open to all of them. And then motive, because the reader gets the backstories of who all these people were, the more that's revealed, the better, the clearer it becomes that every single one of these 6 people have a motive for killing this person that was murdered. So I didn't give them only 1 or 2, although you could. Christie sometimes does that. And then she does this reveal at the end where Poirot brings in something that she hadn't brought in before. And I don't like that, where Poirot goes, oh, by the way, you didn't know this before, but look what I found just now. Give me everything and see if I can figure it out. Okay. I'm currently 7,000 words into the latest mystery I'm writing. Hooray! All of the characters have made an appearance, including the murderer. How do I not make it obvious that the murderer is the murderer? Well, you either give him a public persona that's completely different than what he really is. Have this, and I'm saying him, it could be a her also. Women commit murders occasionally. Don't make it obvious by giving them a different personality type, by having them say, well, they don't have to even say, well, I couldn't have been there. You can make it obvious that this person, weren't they outside when that murder was committed and it was committed inside? Weren't they on the fourth floor and the murder was committed on the second floor? They were in the bathroom taking a bath. I heard the water running, so little details like that may be important. Congratulations for getting this far. Keep it up, keep it up. You often write two stories to write a murder mystery, the story of the murder and the story of, there it is, of the investigation. How do you write backstory without falling into exposition dumps? You give your detective a foil, somebody to talk to. Hercule Poirot and Hastings. Holmes has Watson. Maybe your detective has a favorite dog and he talks to the dog, or you can put things in thoughts. To me, that's a little harder because what people think can fly all over the place and it becomes a little messier, things get tangled. But you could certainly write backstories that the reader would know. I do all the time. I'm telling a story about this lady. Nobody else knows this story, but now I'm going to tell you this story so you know it. And because I'm writing in one point of view, and you can switch points of view. If you switch points of view, start a new paragraph and put like 3 dots in between, or start a new chapter and put that chapter as the backstory that's told from one of the other characters' viewpoint. That works out really well. Let's see. Murder mysteries work different on page than on the screen. Yes, they do. Horowitz has written for both. Horowitz is a wonderful murder mystery writer. I've had several people say to me that Deserving of Murder would make a great play. It would not. I have a friend that worked in Hollywood as an assistant director for a number of years, and she does a lot of drama, play type drama, play writing, play directing mainly. And she looked at it and she said, there are too many different spots here. However, it might work better like on television, like some of the Acorn Miss Fisher mysteries or one of those, because on the movie, the camera can do different things that you cannot do in a play. So that being said, murder mysteries, Horowitz's in particular, Magpie Murders, if you have watched that at all, is absolutely wonderful. When I read the book, I thought, oh, this will never make it to the screen. It's so complex. And yet they did, and they did a marvelous job. I'm not a screenwriter. Actually, my daughter does have a screenwriting degree, so I can always go to her. And I'm not a playwright. I write fiction. I write novels, murder mysteries on the page. I don't think about what the movements are going to be, because when you're writing a screenplay or a play, you're doing only dialogue. If you open my books, there's a lot more in there than just dialogue. There's a lot of description. This is when I think about Shakespeare. I taught a course in Shakespeare for years. He doesn't give any stage directions. There's only one, exit pursued by bear in one of his plays. And so it's up to the director as to how you're going to put it on the stage. But of course, he was of the mindset of everything goes on the stage. I'm on the mindset of everything goes in a book rather than on a stage or on a television screen. So that's where can you find my books? Oh, that is a wonderful question. There are a number of places you can go. You can go to blackrosewriting.com/sales. Black Rose Writing, they are my publisher. You can go to Amazon. That's probably the easiest place, and just put in Marianne Noe, and everything will come up. Barnes and Noble can get my books, any independent bookstore, and libraries. So, but you can certainly, and I see she's posted my webpage, mariannenoe.com. There are links to my blogs, there's photos, there's information on how to order books. So, let's see. Pantsing or plotting, you'll have to tell me what pantsing is. Do I have a writing schedule? No. How do I stay on track with a storyline over time? Well, I've written now, I just Deserving of Murder came out last fall. The second one in the series, the Lynn and Alfred tale, comes out in May, although you can pre-order it now if you go to Black Rose Writing. They'll give you a little bit of a discount. And it's called Glass Flowers and Diamond Stick Pins. That one will come out, and I just signed a contract for a third one that will be out in 2026. So how do I stay on track? Sometimes I don't. People will ask me a question. I'll go, wait a minute, what book is that from now? Is that Glass Flowers, or is that Shadows, or is that Deserving of Murder? Give me a minute. I got to remember. So, and my writing schedule is very frenetic. But when I sit down to write, I can write for 2 hours and don't even bother me. I'm gone. I do not write every day. I just don't have the time to, I mean, I could, but I don't. And sometimes my ideas need to kind of ferment, or like dough rising. It has to sit in there for a while. Classification, literary murder mystery. You know what? I don't know that there's a difference. Is it a qualitative difference? Usually if something is labeled literary, the vocabulary level is higher. That it's a little fancier. I don't care what you call mine. Somebody said, "Oh, yours are like cozies," and I said, "Are you going to buy the book and read it?" Yeah, and I said, "Fine, that's good. That's what I want. I want you to read my books." So that's really something. Pantsing, often writing without outline, flying by the seat of your pants, of course. And I've done both. I've outlined and I have flown by the seat of my pants. I find in most of the books, as I write more and more and more, I'm finding that what you call pantsing, I love that, is much more effective for me because it can allow things to flow out. And I never stop and edit it. Just write, get it down and get a garbage copy out. And you can always go back and rewrite. I don't write. I don't use a yellow legal pad or anything unless I'm writing poetry. I do it on a computer. Yes. The only question that ultimately matters, are you going to buy the book and read it? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That's why we're writing. Well, we write because we have to write. There's a story that needs to be told. I love telling my stories. I love talking to people. I'm so glad I could talk with you guys tonight, or hear from you over the chat. I'm always available to do book talks on Zoom, so you can certainly contact me. My name, with no capitals, no spaces, Marianne Noe, and I'm at iCloud.com. That's the easiest one. You can also go through my webpage, which is a Gmail account. So it's fun. And you're very welcome. I do Zoom into book clubs who read my books. Yes, I do. And I love it. I love talking to people about my books. I love talking about reading. I love talking about the publishing process because it's something that a lot of people don't realize what you go through. It's like being pregnant. It takes, 9 to 12 months to get a book from the query letter where you ask the publisher, do you want this? To when you're actually holding the book in your hand. So it's a long process, but it's worth it. Keep writing. Any other questions? I'm open to anything. Took you 2 years to write? Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. Keep it up. To publish. Yep. That's not unusual. It took you 2 years to publish, and I'm so glad you have. That's just wonderful. I wrote my first book My very first book, I was 8 years old. I was going to get the Pulitzer Prize in Literature. Do I have it? No. Will I get it? No. Do I care? No. I started writing a little mystery, and the church bell clinged 12. Bong, bong. I got to the fourth bong and I gave up. I didn't go back to writing poetry and short stories until I was in middle school and high school, and then really the longer stuff in the 1990s. And I'm 77, so don't give up. Keep writing and join a writing group. They're wonderful. Oh, I have so many that I love. I love Greenwood, who wrote the Phryne Fisher mysteries, and Corinna. In fact, she wrote a blurb for the book that's coming out in May. Carrie Greenwood. I'm just so pleased. I love William Kent Kruger. I love Horowitz, Balducci, Donna Leone, and on and on and on. Christie, of course. Thanks for asking. Thanks again very much.
Yes, all right. Hello. Thank you so much for all your wonderful questions. That was a really excellent Q&A session. But it is time for the library to close, so I'm going to end this meeting here. Thank you all so much. We at the Galena Library, we have some virtual presentations with authors all year round, not just in January for LitFest. So if you haven't followed us on Eventbrite, go ahead and do that, and you'll see when we have new author programs coming up and other things that we do virtually. So
Thank you for
thank
the
you all
for
so
the
much.
opportunity, and I see people all over the place. This is nice. Keep in
Yeah,
touch. Keep
yeah.
writing. Keep reading.